So go ahead. What was the question, Jillian?
The question is, how does this affect hiring labor through temp agencies or similar staffing entities that handle the payroll and list that person as their employee, but they work for a contractor regularly?
Good question. I think that that's an excellent question. This law doesn't address that. Nor does it address why it's penalizing contractors for having people working for them that are employees of other companies. Because, you know, when you have a separate business entity and the business entity has employees and they don't meet all those tests we just lined up, you know, why, if someone's paying in the workers' comp, unemployment, et cetera, on those people, should you be subject to any penalties at all? That doesn't make sense. And I can't answer that question yes or no at this point in time. It's going to depend on how the cases come down on this and what regulations the Department of Labor puts into effect after the statute comes into effect next week. So that's unclear. I can't say that I can give you a direct answer on that.
The next question is, any idea what substantial investment means? For instance, many smaller contractors only need their tools and a truck. They don't need a building, heavy equipment, or inventory.
Do I have any idea what it means? I have a feeling what it may mean, okay, but I can't tell you that they've established a threshold for it at this point in time. And again, this is something that's going to have to come out in what's been, you know, what is addressed later on as far as when cases are brought and these penalties are challenged. But, you know, I think this law actually does put a chilling effect on small contractors because I think they're going to be a lot riskier people to bring on as opposed to someone who's established and has numerous employees. And it's going to be tough for them. I think people are going to shy away, these contractors are going to shy away from bringing them onto jobs because I think it isn't clear on a lot of these standards that the general contractor is going to not be liable. You know, my feeling is that they don't just want somebody who's got a few tools and really doesn't have anything established. You know, they should have an office, maybe some office furniture, whether or not that's a home office or what it is, truck, transportation, maybe some advertising, maybe some business cards. They should try and set themselves up. But you're right. I think that, you know, especially when you're just starting a business, you don't have the wherewithal to do that. And obviously, they're not all. I don't think they all have to have heavy equipment or major equipment as an investment to meet that threshold. I can't imagine that's what the standards are going to set. Is that the only question, Jillian?
Yeah, there's no more at the moment.
Okay. The questions have all been good thus far, so I appreciate that. You all have to understand that you know, they threw this statute together. They really haven't. There's a lot of areas that, as a lawyer, I'm seeing huge holes in this. So there's going to be a lot of things that you're not going to know for sure probably till this law's been in effect for a year or two. So it's going to be risky. So what are the practical effects of all this? I really think that as general contractors or someone who's bringing someone on to your job, you really have to get involved in their business. You need to know a lot about it. You need to know what they've been doing for the past couple of years. You need to know who they employ. You need to know whether or not they're paying their taxes, whether or not they're paying workers' comp or unemployment, because obviously the quickest way to get hit with one of these audits is if they're violating the law, because once the government comes on, then that's when they're going to start looking at you very closely. Also, you know, as I mentioned before, there's going to be a bias against small subcontractors, and it's going to be hard for new subcontractors to get into the market. I think that it's going to be very tough for them because if I'm sitting there and I want to bring them onto a job, I'm going to have a lot of questions and concerns that I'm not going to be able to meet all those business entity factors. I'm not going to be able to show that they're holding their services out to the public, especially if it's a big job. Say they're working for me and I'm their primary work for 6 months a year. You know, I think I have a real risk as a GC of someone coming on and saying that person should have been my employee. I also think that, you know, what's going to happen here too is that you're going to open yourself up to greater extent, because the test is harder now than it used to be, for workers' comp penalties on those people, unemployment tax penalties on those people. Same thing with overtime and discrimination. The definition of who's your employee is going to expand greatly. So anyone who's working on your site, you have to be concerned with, what's going on with them. Are they being paid overtime? Do they have workers' comp insurance on them? If they get hurt, is it being handled correctly? I think you're going to have to be a lot more involved in the labor aspect of what's going on your site. Even if you don't control the subcontractors and what they do with their employees, you need to know the information and be involved. And you need to have some sort of system whereby they notify you or provide proof that they're complying, and or if there's any incidents on site, what's going on, so you can make sure it's being handled correctly. And there's a lot of steps that I think you should take initially. Probably the most important is you need to know your sub before you bring them on. You need to know the individual before you bring them on to make sure that they're going to meet all these tests and the relationship that you're going to have with them. You're going to want proof in your files of workers' comp coverage. You probably should get proof of how they're paying payroll. You should look at the hours, et cetera, to make sure, at least in a periodic report, that they're handling things correctly. It's almost like, for those of you that do public jobs, when you look at your subs and you're responsible for your subs and how they're paying people to make sure that they're compliant with the requirements. I think you have to take the same steps now in both public and private jobs. Also, you want to make sure that you have documentation that you did all this, that you've taken all these steps to try and comply with the new requirements, and that you looked at all these factors and the subcontractor was able to meet them to your satisfaction. The reason being is that a lot of these penalties come in for willful violations, and it's a knew or should have known standard, which is very easy to show willfulness. You either knew or should have known this person was an employee instead of an independent contractor. The only way you fight that. I have
another question when you're ready. Sorry.
the only way to fight that is to show, hey, I looked at this, I did an analysis, and this is what I based my judgment on. And so maybe it's flawed, but I thought I had a good basis for finding this person an independent contractor. Again, I'm just going to wrap up quickly, and I'll take more questions. Is that you obviously need contracts more than ever with your subcontractors, also to tell them what the requirements are and to set that you know that they meet these certain criteria, that they're independent businesses, that there's no restrictions on them working for competitors, et cetera. You need that in the contract someplace so you can show it to the auditor when they show up on your workplace. Obviously, and then you want to comply with the nitty-gritty, which is the postings. You want to make sure workers' comp is paid, unemployment is paid. You want to make sure those little details are taken care of. And you also want to address employee complaints, because that's going to be the main source of enforcement here. Is if anyone whistleblows to the Department of Labor or workers' comp, that's how you're going to get involved in an investigation. So you want to head those off to the extent possible. Probably should have some sort of policy or notice that anyone can complain up to you about any problems, so they're more likely to go to you than to an agency. So that's really it. So Jillian, what was the question that you have?
Okay, there's actually two more. We as contractors had a meeting seminar back at the first of the year about workman's comp, and that no matter what, if we are having people working on our site, we have to pay workman's comp no matter whether they are subs or employees. This was put on by our local building code people. They are now allowing contractors to get around this by setting up a partnership to get around this. Is this legal according to what you are telling us? I think not.
I'm not sure exactly what the partnership to get around it means, but let's put it this way. I don't know if it's a private or public site. Is that it's best for you to make sure that everybody has workers' comp coverage. And I always tell general contractors they have a policy that covers both your employees and your independent contractors. Under this law, really the reason that it's a problem for you is that if someone gets hurt and there's not coverage through one of your subs, that you're much more likely to get an investigation. The fact that your subcontractor doesn't pay the appropriate taxes on those people, whether it's workers' comp or unemployment, can factor into them not meeting all the tests and them not being a separate business entity and those people being considered your employees. So I do think that you need to be involved in making sure that everyone has workers' comp. If they have workers' comp, your sub has workers' comp under you, I don't think it's a necessity for you definitely to cover the workers' comp as well. I always just think it's a good policy because even if you have somebody on, they tell you that they have workers' comp and they don't, it normally doesn't cost that much for you to get independent contractor coverage, and that way you're covered in case somebody gets hurt because you don't want to get sued for someone getting crushed or killed or someone falling off of scaffolding. It's always just good to have it in your coverage, but that's a separate issue.
Okay. That person who asked the question, Mark, followed up with, the whole reason they are allowing this is so they do not have to pay workman's comp.
Who doesn't? I don't know. Mark, I wish I could hear you. But I don't understand who doesn't have to pay workers' comp. See how fast Mark can type here.
Oh, the contractor.
The general contractor. That's what I'm assuming he's meaning. I understand what he's saying, but I'm presuming that someone. Yeah, I'm presuming that someone is covering them, and as long as someone covers them, you don't have to have separate coverage on them. I think, but it's a different issue to have a policy that includes your independent contractors. But yeah, you should definitely. Under this law, nothing requires you as a general contractor to hold workers' comp coverage over people that are truly independent contractors. You just better make sure that those people that are independent contractors do have their own coverage.
Okay. So someone wrote, does Mark mean that they form a partnership and claim that they are exempt because they are all owners/partners?
I see.
Yes, Mark says yes.
Yeah, okay.
And we have another.
That explains it to it. Listen, if they're, so you have a couple guys that get together and say, we're all owners of the company, therefore we're exempt from coverage or having to have coverage. They're probably not always right because there's very strict laws in how many partners you can have in order to not have workers' comp coverage. And once you get above a certain amount, I believe it's 2 or 3. I don't know off the top of my head. 2 or 3, you have to have workers' comp anyway. You want them to certify that they don't have to carry workers' comp or that they'll cover workers' comp to the extent necessary by law. I mean, there's nothing in the test itself that says that they have to have workers' comp. It just says they have to, report the income to the IRS.
Okay, and another question is, one of the criteria for a separate business entity is that it owns the capital goods. What does capital goods refer to in this context?
It means it owns its assets. I've got the statute open. I'm looking at what you got there, and essentially it means that it operates as its own business. Okay, it owns its trucks, it owns its tools, and it bears the risk for profit and loss. It operates as an independent business. That's part of the 4th bullet point down on my slide 11. If anybody wants these slides too, I'll shoot them out to you. We'll figure out a way to do that. But that's what it means.